Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Ahead of a long overdue state visit by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu highlighted Jerusalem's proactive approach to cultivating a new alliance. This geostrategic architecture includes countries such as India, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, Greece, Cyprus, alongside additional countries which were not mentioned yet, both in the continents of Asia and Africa. The focal point, or rather threat reference, of this emerging alliance, an evident expansion by Islamist regimes throughout the broader region, to include Pakistan, Qatar, Turkey, as well as Syria, among other regional actors. To take a deeper look into this matter, we're joined by Professor Russell Berman, who formerly served as a senior advisor at the U.S. State Department's policy planning staff, currently the senior director of the Islamic World and Middle East Working Group at Hoover Institution at Stanford University. It's great to have you with us, Russell.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
It's always a pleasure indeed. Also joining us is Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence at Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate, among others. It's great having you with us, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Indeed, also good to have you. And last but certainly not least, our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, an alliance that has been taking form for quite some time now. We have the East Med, of course. We have the interconnector that they're going to establish, the so-called IMAC. Of course, there are plenty of challenges on both fronts, but nonetheless, it seems that this alliance is rapidly emerging into a security alliance. What can you tell us about that?
The problem with alliances, even if you go back to the Warsaw Pact against NATO, is that the components do have some common denominators, but still they have their own private interests, which do not always complement each other. Sometimes they are even contradictory. So, for instance, Israel, Greece, and Cyprus, which you mentioned, can agree on a mutual stance vis-à-vis Turkey. But on other issues, they may diverge.
Such as?
And let's look at Jordan even. Jordan and Israel are peace partners. But Jordan has just announced that even though Israel is keen on fighting Iran, Jordan would not let its airspace.
Yeah, but Jordan is not part of this alliance.
No, but other alliances. And you mentioned the UAE. Israel also wants to have good relations, normal relations with Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia and the Emirates are competitors. So as long as you narrow it down to 2 or 3 partners with a very, very explicit aim, maybe. But the more partners you have, the more divergence you would later find, and it would be an alliance of the willing for a certain issue.
Interesting. Well, Professor Berman, I hope you're more optimistic on this emerging alliance, but I'm very keen on hearing your position.
Well, Mr. Oren is right that every alliance has internal tensions because there are always multiple motives. Everybody wants many things at the same time, and the question is, can wise leaders make good decisions about how to prioritize one goal over another? The Israel-India partnership has been emerging over time, and it makes a lot of sense economically, in terms of defense, but of course also ideologically, since the Indian government and the Israeli government perceive Islamism as a threat. Israel, Greece, and Cyprus see Turkey as a threat, not only because of the Muslim Brotherhood orientation of Erdogan, but also because of his neo-Ottomanism, which is a separate layer. It'll be an issue of can this alliance be held together? What I find particularly interesting in this new constellation is the UAE versus Saudi competition. How much what's driving that? And I guess it's multifactorial. I think there's some personal animosity among the leadership. I think there are different visions of economic and technological progress. Saudi reverting to its position as a power of stability, UAE being more innovative. But this is playing out now in multiple theaters in Yemen, in Sudan, in Somaliland as well. So fasten your seatbelts.
Fasten your seatbelts, indeed. General Sofrin, I'm keen to hear your take on that. Naturally, you know very closely the various alliances, respectively, but this new joining of forces, so to speak, that we are seeing is something that has been brewing for quite some time.
I think that we should differ between different alliances in this context that you're talking about. I think that first of all, we have to look at the alliance between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus as a different one, which is aimed to face the Turkish threat. Turkey is threatening, first of all, Cyprus because it holds part of Cyprus. It wants to build a military force and military port or naval port in the northern part of Cyprus, and that poses a threat on the Greeks that are living on the southern part of this island. And of course, it is part of Greece, and of course, Greece is very, very keen about that and very concerned about that, and are arming themselves very heavily to face Turkish on not only there, but on the Aegean Sea and on the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea as well, because Turkey has a lot of ambition. And as Professor Berman told the 34 neo-Ottomanism of Erdogan is part of that. And this is only one part of the alliance. Another alliance is with India, which, as was published, they are going to have what we call to raise it up to strategic level, or strategic alliance between Israel and India. That means, first of all, on the security and defense establishment is going to have a lot of implications for mutual development and mutual technologies that are being transferred from side to side and supporting each other and other things as well. But I think the main idea is that India wants to have a corridor, a land corridor leading from UAE through the Middle East, and Israel is a very important part of that, leading to the Mediterranean Sea, and from that to Europe, which shortens the ability of India to deliver merchandise and goods to Europe on a shorter term or shorter route than is being done right now.
Yeah, but General Sofrin, and I think this will be an open question to all three of you, since this is a point that needs to be highlighted. Turkey, from Israel's perspective, is a rival. It's not an enemy. And within this context, it's not at the same level of threat that is perceived, for instance, in Athens and Nicosia, that is Greece and Cyprus. On the other hand, we do see Turkey supporting Pakistan, for instance, as opposed to Israel that openly and strongly supports India. And this alignment, so to speak, is also with taking Qatar into context, since Qatar is very deliberate in its support of various Turkish activities and vice versa throughout this area. Earlier, we heard Professor Berman speaking, of course, about Somalia and Somaliland, where we do see the Emiratis very supportive of the Somaliland, which brought also Israel into this context. We see a lot of the various countries that I mentioned earlier really operating succinctly versus another axis that is also operating very succinctly in an ongoing parallel rivalry where points of friction are observed and do occur on a regular basis. Now, within that context, does this, within the security context of this issue, I'm not even speaking about the economic, where there's vast potential and activities going on between both the Israeli so-called alliance versus the Turkish axis. Here we do see on the security front a true alignment of sorts where there is little to no deficiencies.
When you say true, you must also add the term temporary. Because when one goes back to David Ben-Gurion and Adnan Menderes and the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, in the 50s and 60s, there was such an alliance.
So you're saying Iran will soon join the Israeli alliance?
No, I'm saying that Iran used to be Israel's best secret friend in the region until the Shah was toppled. At the time, Egypt was Israel's worst enemy, and lo and behold, the tables were turned. They started turning when Sadat changed Nasser's policy. Nasser was against the Shah. Sadat became very friendly with him. Later, of course, Khomeini became Israel's diehard enemy, but Egypt is a peace partner. Erdogan changed Turkish policy vis-à-vis Israel. In the 1990s, Turkey, along with Jordan, were Israel's best security partners in the region. This could change again once there are new leaders in place.
It is a very important point which you just raised, because I think it's quite apparent that Israel is going outside of its way, out of its way, so to speak, in order to ensure that Israel and Turkey do not cross into enemy territory. Same happening from Turkey's perspective. We heard the various statements coming out of Ankara by Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. We heard the remarks by Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar during his trip to Azerbaijan. There are various activities that are taking place under American supervision to try and also mitigate risk. Now,
There is a
Professor,
deconflicting mechanism in Syria.
absolutely. Well, each one stated its own terms, but that's a different story. Professor Berman, I'd like to have your analysis in this context.
Well, yes, there are so-called deconflicting mechanisms underway, but I'm not optimistic that Turkey and Israel are going to patch things up until there's a change of leadership in Ankara, and that may not be as soon as some people hope. There's a whole other dimension to this that we should consider, and that we began by Mr. Oren talking about the difficulties within any alliance. A lot of it we're talking about spills over into NATO. Greece and Turkey are NATO partners, but in many other perspectives, they're barely partners at all. Add to this the recent complexity about the position the United Kingdom has taken on the use of air bases by the United States to attack Iran. Starmer has said no to that, which is quite a stance for the United Kingdom to take, and Greece has stepped in. So what's going on in the larger Middle East, that is from Israel to New Delhi, has ramifications in Brussels.
Very interesting indeed. And it is also very apparent that the rhetoric within the halls of NATO, so to speak, is becoming increasingly anti-Turkish, which is quite interesting to see, since it does fluctuate. It doesn't mean that it's all the time anti-Turkish. Turkey also contributes a lot of forces. Just in the last exercises in Germany, there were large contingencies from Turkey that joined there, including in other locations. But this is not a Turkish-led alliance, so to speak. There are other actors playing a crucial role here. Dr. Sofrin, I'd like to hear your take.
There is what we call a new Sunni alliance in the Middle East. If until about 6 months ago or 8 months ago, we spoke about the Shiite axis, now we see a Sunni axis, or Sunni-controlled axis, or led. That concludes or is actually based on Turkey on one hand, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Qatar. Now, Pakistan and Turkey and Qatar have mutual interests. They are both supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. They are both supporting Hamas. They have a lot of ambition to support Hamas in Gaza and to see that Hamas is not being demolished, but it still stays in Gaza. That's part of their ideology. And they support it with a lot of money. Israel also, of course, objects to the fact that Turkish forces will be sent to the ISF in Gaza, as well as from Qatar, but nevertheless, they have a lot of influence there. There are a lot of groups that are working in the area that is controlled by Hamas, west from what we call the yellow line, which is IDF is deployed in Gaza along it. And that means that they are there, they have a lot of influence, and they will influence a lot of the future of Gaza, and they will not allow Hamas to be demolished. That's one part of the equation. The second issue is to raise what we call some kind of alliance that is now being established, some kind of, first of all, between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, what we call a mutual defense pact. That means that each one is obliged to assist the other one if the other one is attacked. And this is something that has a long history, and there were rumors that Pakistan promised Saudi Arabia to have what we call a nuclear umbrella if and when needed. And now the relationship on the defense area are becoming more stronger and more tighter. On the other hand, Turkey is trying to join this pact, but not as part of what we call a triangle, but each one differently. That means that Turkey is going to have another pact with Saudi Arabia, a different one. And if you combine all the three together, some people define it as a new, what we call a NATO Islamic pact that should be what we call a new axis within the Middle East. Now, this one is posing posing or power projecting into two dimensions. The first one is vis-a-vis the Shiites, meaning Iran. That means we have a lot of power and we stand together against the Iranians. If the Iranians are going to try to challenge us, no matter if it is related to an American attack or something like that, or another occasion, we are going to face it. And the second one, it poses a great risk against Israel, because Israel is now Israel is going to face a new pact that should be calculated how to treat it and how to deal with that, because it's most complicated, because we have a lot of ambition to go into normalization with Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia is now joining hands with Pakistan and Turkey, which are not really one people or countries that are very fond of Israel. And this creates a new reality that should be thought of deeply and calculated, and to find out the best way to compete with that.
Well, not just Saudi Arabia, we do see also Jordan rubbing shoulders and trying to increasingly establish overtures towards the so-called Muslim Brotherhood Pact, even though they themselves have just recently banned the Muslim Brotherhood from the Hashemite Kingdom. A decision that was taken in the Jordanian parliament was passed and praised by the Muslim Brotherhood, in which they decided to delete the name Israel from all the maps and public records in Jordan, since they reference Israel as an enemy state in their perception and the enemy of the Muslim world, as they put it, which also does raise questions as to what is happening there and why is the Hashemite monarchy not more involved in altering this, since they are heavily reliant on Israeli water and energy and other aspects. And we do see also Egypt now increasingly rubbing shoulders with Turkey and Qatar and other countries related to the Muslim Brotherhood, which also does raise questions as to what's happening there. They are, of course, aligned on the situation in Sudan in support of Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the military committee, so to speak, as well as Khartoum, not Khartoum, the Somalia specifically, where we see them both operating there quite succinctly. But still, there are many question marks that need to be asked, particularly in light of the diminishing power of Iran in the region. Many shifts are occurring. Now, Mr. Oren, within that context, what should we take into consideration?
Well, first of all, if you talk about history, not only did the United States fight Great Britain at least twice, War of Independence and then in 1812, but in the Rainbow series of planning documents in the 1930s, Britain was one of the potential enemies. Turned out, of course, that there is this special relationship and alliance. The problem with mutual security...
I have to say this about the UK, because what London has been doing in recent months, even longer, from a strategic perspective, cannot be construed any less than strategic negligence. They have undercut on so many national strategic interests of the United Kingdom for there are many question marks, and I speak to many people in the UK in practitioner levels, on the senior levels. They are baffled by the policymakers there these days.
Politicians usually believe that they need the support of the people. They may be wrong, but mutual security or collective security has a fatal flaw, and that is the veto power. You mentioned NATO and Turkey. Look at the EU, with Hungary vetoing help to the Ukraine because Viktor Orban is more friendly towards Vladimir Putin. So when you have an alliance, you know that sooner or later your partner may have another interest and therefore will not join you in your fight.
Indeed. Well, we're drawing near to the end of the program, and I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to provide a certain lens, or rather a school of thought, into the context of this newly, not so new, but nonetheless emerging alliance, security alliance, at the expense of a diminishing Iran in the region. Professor Berman, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. 2 points. There's an irony in history here. The logic of the Abraham Accords involved the assumption that Saudi Arabia would be fearful of a belligerent Iran. Israel and the United States together have significantly diminished Iran. That significantly diminishes the incentive for Saudi Arabia to enter the Abraham Accords. So victory has turned into a kind of defeat. The second point is the alacrity with which the second alliance has been spreading, and I don't think you can discount the role of elite capture by Qatari money. Qatar is buying influence in capitals and universities around the world, and it's doing so very successfully.
Very interesting. Well, we'll have to see how a potential American attack on Iran at some point could also include Bandar Abbas, which would then curtail much of the Qatari offshore gas reservoirs, if not done correctly. So they'll have to be very careful. I'm not sure everybody needs to be careful in that context, but nonetheless, we'll have to wait and see what evolves there. General Sofrin?
I also like to mention 2 points. The first one is looking at Turkey and listening to President Erdogan and the Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs, Hakan Fidan. Both of them are speaking about ambition to have nuclear weapons. And this is what we call an equation breaking point. That means that they see themselves as what we call a superpower, neo-Ottomanism, as mentioned before. And this is part of the ambition to be what we call the leading country of within the Muslims world in all. And that means they have some competition with Saudi Arabia on one hand and with Egypt on the second hand. Now, regarding the relations between Turkey and Egypt, it's not going to be something that it's kind of the relations that have, Turkey with Saudi Arabia or with Pakistan. It's another kind of relations that are more with economical fruits that they're looking for, and in kind of way to approach to Egypt as what we call a very leading country within the Muslim world, and to join hands in some case, but nevertheless to be the leading or the leaders of the Muslim world. That they want. This is what they want.
Well, with the current trajectory, it seems like the United Kingdom, rather than Turkey, would be the second Muslim country with nuclear weapons, Pakistan being the first, of course. Mr. Oren?
Well, God forbid, or Allah forbid, or whoever, that Israel should get involved in the India versus Pakistan nuclear exchange. We shouldn't be drawn into other people's conflicts. Also, we have gotten to the end of the show without mentioning the Board of Peace with President Trump, where several of the countries mentioned here are cohabitating, even though they are at loggerheads outside of the Board of Peace.
Indeed. Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Professor Berman and General Dr. Sofrin for all of your valuable insights. I'd like to thank Mr. Amir Oren and to thank you at home as well. Till our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at tv7israelnews.com. Israel has launched operations
on Vladimir Putin.
helping Iran develop. We have logic, we have rationale, we understand how the system operates.